Um, all right. Anyone who doesn't know who I am, um, if there are anyone who isn't friends or family here, then my name is Joaquin. I am the author of Bullet Catcher 1 through 3 for Cereal Box. Um, uh, and I am here to read from my latest book, which is the third in the series. Um, it follows this main cast of characters through this fantastical uh, Western steampunky sort of world called the Southland. And I'm going to drop you into this third season here, where basically what's happened in between the second and the third book is some time has passed and some of the characters have gone their own ways. And now there is this new threat that needs to be taken on by getting sort of the posse back together. So in the scene, we drop in on our main character, Immaculata, after she's been missing for nearly a year. So I guess I'll just get right into it and start going here. Beside me, sitting atop the bar stool, the creature coos in its basket. It looks up at me with big, dark, brown eyes, the shape of my brother's, the shape of my own. I ladle a small spoonful of warm grits in its mouth. It smacks its lips and rewards me with a toothless smile, clapping its chubby hands together. What the hell did I do to deserve you, I ask, and it coos in reply, laughing at nothing. It's a happy little creature, a beautiful little thing. And I guess it's friendly enough looking that it causes most of the people around these parts to come up and play with it. They tickle its chin and grab its fingers. Uh, the old ones love it best, and here at the bar, they'll each come over at some point or another, as if to pay their respect to the creature. And then they go back to their tables where they recount their experiences with the thing, how it smiled at them and cooed and rolled over on its side or put its whole foot in its mouth. It's a long time since anything so beautiful has been seen around here. That's what they say, at least. Great power in small things. Lobo taught me that. If a person goes around looking innocent and acting naive, if a person dares to laugh or smile or show weakness or fear or sadness, it's likely because they have the strength to do so. I believed him when he told me these things, because looking at him, an old man, skinny as a tent pole, and seeing what he was capable of, there was no choice but to believe it. Looking at this little creature, snoozing now in its basket beside me, the whole town under its sway, I believe it again. I see Lobo's wisdom in this creature, as if all the goodness he showed me has somehow settled behind its big eyes. But then again, isn't everyone born good? It's growing up that twists the person up. How do I keep that from happening to you? I ask the creature, but its eyes are closed now, drool and snot glimmering around its mouth and nose. No, I don't know either. Supposing we just keep on running then. What do you say? The bat wings swing open. I know who it is before she even says my name, just by the sound of her boots on the floorboards. Emma. That's another thing Lobo taught me. There ain't no one who can run forever. When I turn, Cass is standing in the doorway, and Nico too. I'd figured when Cass came to get me, she'd come alone. It's strange seeing Nico like this, so different from the man I'd met so few years ago. They march across the bar like they're a couple of lawmen come to put me in irons. The look on Cass's face says she's got a speech all planned out, probably been working on it the whole ride over. But when she sees the creature, she freezes in her boots. The ability to turn Cass speechless? That's power. I guess I'm not so different from everyone else in this dead-end town. I can't help but admire the little creature. Cass takes off her hat, squeezing the brim tightly in her hands. Is this... how long? 4 months, nearly 5. Is it his? But before I can answer, Nico goes over to the basket and wakes the creature. It always cries when it wakes. Even now, its eyes start to well. Its tiny hands and feet ball up, ready for the fit. But then it looks up at Nico and its eyes go big. Nico tickles its belly and the creature giggles. I've never seen anything so perfect, Nico says. He smiles at the creature, and then at me. What's its name? Don't got one yet. Why not? Cass asks like an accusation. Can't rush these things. What use does it have for one anyway? Cass stares at the creature but doesn't approach it. We've come to bring you back, she says. I figured, but I can't. The muscles around Cass's mouth tighten. And why not? Her eyes flick to the creature and then back at me. You have a kid and suddenly the fight goes out of you? That's right. I had a kid, she says. I kept fighting. I remember. You showed me his grave. Cass's eyes turned to fire. I'd never seen her look at me like that, like I was the enemy, like she'd as soon kill me as speak to me again. So what'll you do instead, Nico intervenes. Anything else. Cass can't look at me. We both know if she does, she's likely to slug me for what I said. And maybe I have it coming, but I know she understands, deep down, under the anger. Nico picks up the basket and sets it on the bar and sits down beside me. So what? You're going to wait tables somewhere? You're going to run an inn? After everything you've done, everything you've seen? Whatever it takes. He shakes his head. We both know it ain't as easy as that. Nothing ever is. It took us 5 days to find you, Cass says. How long do you reckon it'll take for the gunslingers once they start looking? If I stay out of their way, they'll stay out of mine. And if they do come, I'll be ready. And then I'll move on to someplace else. Cass fixes her hat on her head and turns as though to leave. The child isn't the only one who needs you, Emma. You were like a daughter to Lobo, like one to me. Watertown needs you and so does your family. And then she marches out of the bar without even looking at me. Nico watches her go. Then he flags down the bartender to order a drink. So what now, I ask him. He shrugs. Guess we'll head out tomorrow. It was a long ride out here and Cass ate no spring chicken. She'll be fine. Everyone's fine till they ain't. What's that supposed to mean? Nico tickles the creature. She's slipping, Emma. She'd never admit it, but she knows it. Only reason I'm here is to make sure she didn't get herself killed tracking you down. She's old, Emma. Older every day. That don't matter. He shrugs. Like I said, it don't until it does. And if I hadn't followed her, she'd have been killed just outside Watertown. Just a small band of gunslingers. Is that true? He turns and looks at me in the eye, and I know the answer before he speaks. It's truth. He drops a couple coins on the bar. He looks down at the creature and smiles. I won't begrudge you none if you don't come, if you do what you say you're going to do. Just keep on moving south. I might do the same thing if I had this little one to look after. But Cass wasn't lying when she said we needed you. And I'm not lying when I tell you that without you, Watertown will die. Without you, all the sons and daughters of Watertown will die. I'll die. Cass will die. Raynor and Knack. Knack. How is he? Not the same since you left. None of us are. You don't have to go back. Once upon a time, you came back for me. I figured the best I can do is go back for them. He stands. You sound like him, you know? Like who? Like Lobo. It makes me smile to know there's anything that reminds Nico of Lobo. I suppose that's what happens when you got no one to talk to for so long. And then when you do, it's a little creature that doesn't know its ass from its elbow. We'll be at the inn, he says. Come see us before we leave in the morning. I watch him go, before turning back to the creature and placing it back in the spot on the stool beside me. Every time I watch Nico leave, it seems like the last time I'll see him. The creature looks up at me, its big, unblinking eyes full of questions it doesn't yet have words for. You don't know yet what it's like to lose a person, and you won't for a good long while. Not as long as I have something to say about it. It's near dusk when I leave the saloon. It's busiest this time of day, when the sun has just dipped and the heat has mellowed. There's a commotion at the other end of the street, and suddenly everyone is running to find cover. Down the street, 10 riders on horseback kick up a whirlwind of sand and dust. The rider at the front, dressed in black, holds his gun over his head, firing it into the air. It's been a long time since I'd encountered a gunslinger, a real one, with the tattoos and scars and war stories. But even from a distance, I can tell he's the real deal. A chill runs down my back. My fingers tingle, sensing the nearness of gunfire. Outside the inn, the riders dismount and charge through the doors, guns drawn. They don't know what they're in for. Cass and Nico will be inside, waiting to ambush. I edge closer to the scene, skirting quickly across the boardwalk, noting all the places I can use for cover. The barrels full of sand, the water troughs, the boxes poking out from the alley, and all the while keeping my body between the gunslingers and the creature in its basket. I'm less than a block away when gunfire erupts from inside the inn. I duck into the general store across the street and watch from just inside the door. A window on the second floor shatters. A few patrons rush out into the street, couples holding hands, trying to get away before they catch a bullet. It's two of the gunslingers that Cass and Nico left alive, either to question or to send back with a message. At least that's what I think until the rider in black emerges from the door, his gun gripped in his black-gloved hand. The wind howls and dies, and there in the street, their arms tied behind their backs, are Cass and Nico. The rider in black circles around behind them. Two of his cronies come out and lean against the front of the inn, reloading their shooters. The others must be dead. The scene is quiet. No wind, no sound at all until the rider speaks. Is she here? When neither answers, he squats in front of Cass, takes a fistful of her hair in his hand, and yanks her up to meet his eyeline. You hear me, Granny, the bullet catcher? Is she here? Cass spits in his face. He clubs her with the butt of his gun and pulls his bandana from over his mouth to wipe away the spit. When he collects himself, he stands he stands for a moment, considering what to do next. Then he cocks the hammer of his gun and points it at Cass. Stop. The rider looks up and our eyes meet. Then his eyes flick down to the basket in my hand. The creature looks up at me, half asleep. It's you, isn't it, the rider says. You're the bullet catcher. The bullet catcher is dead. He died in damnation. No, he says, it's you. But there's an easy way to tell. He shoots from the hip. My mind goes blank. It's been some time since anyone took a shot at me. That thing that was such a part of my life for so long, the feeling of it, the anticipation of it, it's gone. I reach down inside myself and it's not there. Instinctively, I throw out my free hand to meet the bullet, twisting away from it with my body, swing the basket behind me to shield the creature. There's just the slightest lick of fire as the bullet crosses my palm, refracts a degree or two, and flies harmlessly past. My hand is smeared with blood. Flicking it off the tips of my fingers, I take a sidelong stance to meet the rider. Back to basics. Present the smallest possible target. Keep your weight balanced. Keep your hands and wrists loose. I tuck the basket behind me, protecting the creature. I remember how this goes. I can do this, but the fear is impossible to quiet. My fingers tremble. I'm sorry, I say to the creature. I'm sorry I'm not better at this whole mother thing. The rider's gun points at the ground. He studies me, looking for his moment to shoot. The wind picks up again, echoing between the buildings, kicking the dust into the air. The rider raises his gun, quick as a whip, but before he can get a shot off, Nico rolls onto his side and kicks the rider in the back of the knee. The shot sails wide. The other gunslingers swing over the boardwalk rail into the street. But then the dust thickens and I can barely see the creature's basket in my hand. I rush through the dust toward the fight. There's a glint of gunmetal, then a body tumbling through the air before getting swallowed up again by the dust. A gunshot, and then another a moment later, as if the shooter was trying to find a target by the echo of the gun. Emma, Cass calls me through the dust. I follow her voice and find her off to one side, out of the street. With her hands still tied behind her back, she's managed to prop herself against the side of the boardwalk. Are you hurt? Her silver hair is tinged red and brown where the rider hit her. Her nose and mouth are smeared with blood. I'll be fine. My knife, it's in my boot. I find it and cut her arms free, and I'm about to head back into the scrum when Cass grabs me. The baby, leave it. My hand is gripped so tightly on the handle of the basket that my knuckles hurt when I give it to Cass. The lack of weight in my hand is like a void. It'll be fine, Cass says. Go. I leave the creature with her and head into the dust. Somewhere I hear fighting, but I can't see my own hands in front of my face. I trip over something, and when I look down, it's one of the gunslingers, his face caked in dirt. There's a gunshot, and another man appears out of the dust and falls at my feet, another dead gunslinger. Emma, Nico appears before me. There's a gun in his hand, even though his hands are still tied behind his back. There's blood on the front of his shirt, but I can't tell if it's his or someone else's. Do you see him? He shouts through the wind, the rider in black. I scan the dust, and there before us the glint of a gun. Get down. I tackle Nico to the ground so the gun goes off. The bullet brushes past us and is swallowed by the dust. Pushing off Nico, I charged at the shooter. Another shot, obscured by dust. No knowing where it goes. He feints left, but the glint of the gun gives him away. I leap at him, burying the point of Cass's blade into his chest. And as though he were the source of the storm itself, no sooner do we hit the ground than the wind goes quiet and the air clears. There's life in the writer's eyes still. He tries to lift his gun, but there's no strength in his arm, and he lets it fall. There will be more, he says, and then the light goes out of his eyes. I hope that was okay.
That was awesome.
That was great. That was really, really good.
Oh, that's my father. Thanks, Dad.
Excellent job, Joaquin.
Thanks, Marco. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marco Palmieri. I'm the Vice President of Content Development at Serial Box. I'm also the producer on Bullet Catcher, and I'm privileged to co-host this event. Thank you all for coming. We're about to start the Q&A portion of our event. And I've got a few questions prepared, but I would encourage everyone to please submit questions in the chat. And, you know, that way it won't be entirely my nonsense coming through. I would much rather take questions from the gathering. So if y'all want to post questions in the chat, please do so, and I will refer to them as we go along. But I'll kick things off. Joaquin, you know, I've been with you on this since the project first came to Serial Box, but it didn't originate with us, you know, and you know, not everyone realizes this, but you know, it started out as a YA novel that was published online in the UK, right?
Yeah, actually, it had a small print run in the UK. Yeah, and it was marketed as a YA novel, but it was always one of those weird things that even when they acquired it, they were thinking we're going to try to market this as a YA novel because we are a YA publisher, but it's a little tricky because it's a little more adult. It's a little more genre bending.
I mean, Emma was always 15, I assume.
Yeah, she was always a young protagonist, and I did the YA tropes of, you know, got rid of her parents. She's got to march out on her own and make her own way, and she has no safety net, and so it has a lot of those YA trappings, but the themes in the book, I think, have always sort of like been a little bit more targeted towards older readers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought that YA is one of those genre things that are a little strange because you hear YA and you think about young readers, but really it's, you know, these are books for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was it like to transition it from thinking of it as a novel to, because Serial Box, as for anyone who doesn't know, Serial Box specializes in doing serials, which often means if we pick up a project that was designed to be a novel originally, it has to be, you know, revised a little bit in order to be serialized. Was that in any way challenging for you?
It was challenging. At the time, I was working with a fantastic editor, Lydia, who was very hands-on, and I remember having some apprehensions, not about the format, but adapting something for.
Yeah, I think you froze. Are you there?
Book.
Really.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you froze for a little bit. I don't know if anyone else experienced that, but continue.
My whole family has recently moved in with me, so I am hunkered down in the garage. So hopefully the internet is okay. Yeah, so she really, you know, took care in really making sure that whatever changes we made really fitted the format well. And as you know, even since that first book came out, you know, as Serial Box has honed in on what works best for the format, that has also changed, and
that's true.
Yeah. You know, gotten better. So yeah, I think it was a learning experience for everyone. But I mean, I think the differences between that first edition and the second edition, I think it's night and day. I think it's for a number of reasons. One, just because I think it fits the format well. Lydia was an amazing editor. And I think I was also a little bit more of a mature writer. So because there was about 5 years in between writing.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot had changed.
Cool. Let me take a question from the group. So Karen Herzog asks, tell us about the origin of the creature.
Hi, Karen. She's a good friend of mine.
Nice.
So the origin of the creature, it's so funny because right now the Mandalorian is so big. But what's cool about the Mandalorian seeing so much success is that the bullet catcher, which does predate the Mandalorian, shares a lot of DNA with that story because it shares the same inspirations. And the number one is this Japanese comic called Lone Wolf and Cub. And for anyone who doesn't know, Lone Wolf and Cub is this fantastic story about a Ronin who is tasked with killing this young infant's child so that this child won't one day challenge the throne. But instead of doing so, he kills everyone else and then takes the child with him. And they travel the countryside righting wrongs, basically. And there's this amazing image of this tired samurai Ronin warrior hauling behind him in a little red wagon, this little baby emperor. And of course, there's a lot of, that's where, Baby Yoda comes from, but that's also where the creature comes from. I was always fascinated by the idea of there's this extremely powerful person who has to take care of someone who is completely vulnerable. And because of doing so, that vulnerability transfers to the strong character. And for the first time in a long time, you can think about them as almost being like an apex predator, suddenly realizing their own vulnerability in a new way because they care about someone more than themselves.
Cool. Ben Johnson asks, what are some of the inspirations for Bullet Catcher? And I know you just mentioned Lone Wolf and Cub, but is there anything beyond that?
Yeah. Hi, Ben. God, besides Lone Wolf and Cub, there were so many things. There was this young adult book. I just went through this whole thing about how Bullet Catcher is not really a YA, but my sister, who's a big inspiration on me because she's a fantastic writer in her own right, she, for the longest time, would beg me to read some of her favorite YA books. And I was, as kind of a snooty reader at the time, I would often tell her I wouldn't want to read them. And finally, I relented on a few of them and was very thankful because they were all great, all her recommendations. But one of them in particular was this book called Fire. And I can't remember who the writer was, but she's really good. But what was really fascinating about it was there was this character, and she represented sort of this black and white goodness. She was the White Knight. She represented everything that was good, but her father was a villain, and not just a villain, but a world-renowned villain. And the thing that was so fascinating about this character is how real his love for his daughter was, even though they were absolute opposites, and would even came to fighting in mortal combat. His love for her was so real, the way that she wrote it. And that was really the inspiration in the first book for Nico, was that here's this character, and everything that he represents is something that is anathema to Emma's character. But the one thing that's legitimate about him is that he really does love her as his sister. So I took that as a big inspiration.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sophia asks if it was Fire by Kristen Kashor.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's the one. Cool.
Great.
So your protagonist is Emma, right? So she's, by the way, I still haven't gotten over the fact that, my sister is named Immaculata, and you've used that name in the story, because I never encounter that name anywhere.
That's Kismet.
Your protagonist is Emma. She starts off at about age 15 in season 1, as we've already mentioned, and she undergoes a lot of changes over the course of the 3 seasons. So without getting too spoilery, of course, you've already kind of revealed that she ends up with a child. How do you see the arc of her character? What's the essence of her journey from beginning to end in broad strokes?
I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment by some of these messages that popped up that were
That's okay.
pretty brutal. I'm sorry. Could you ask the question one more time?
Sure. I said Emma undergoes a lot of changes over the course of 3 seasons, and I'm just wondering how you see her journey. How would you describe the essence of her journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because in the first book, she is really a child at the very beginning, a very young person, and it's a big part of it is her growing up and becoming a very self-possessed adult and forced to be that way. And the second and the third book, it shows this sort of flipping where all of a sudden, like, she was the one who was in danger in the first book, and now she's the one getting people out of danger and really rescuing people. And there is this ups and downs. And the third book is really about her. She has this creature now, and she's thinking, well, her responsibility isn't to anyone else anymore. It's to this person. And a big part of the book is her fighting with that dichotomy of can she love more than one person at a time? Is her loyalty only to the child, or does she owe loyalty? Does she feel loyalty and love enough to lay everything on the line for other people?
That's awesome. So Mitch Lowe asks, in your mind, do the stories you create...
Taylor deserved it.
Was that me? Anyway, I'll start again. In your mind, do the stories you create continue to write in your imagination? Do you use cliffhangers ending the third in the series? And again, that was from Mitch.
Yeah. Hi, Dad. Cliffhangers. Yeah, cliffhangers are really interesting because the history of the book was, the history of the 3 books were always sort of, whether we were going to do another one, it was never set in stone. So it was always walking this fine line of trying to create a satisfying ending, but also create enough drama and mystery where if there is a second or a third one, there would be something to lead into it and unanswered questions. So that was the situation with the books, which was really interesting from a writing point of view, just because I think that the stories feel, in a way, a little bit more real instead of, because they weren't planned as this overarching narrative. They're almost like episodes in this person's life. And I think that is sort of made clear by the fact that there is a certain amount of time that passes between the second and the third book. And when the third book opens up, circumstances are a little bit more breadth in which to explore the characters. I can't remember and whether they live in my mind or not. It's so funny because I was talking with my sister about this earlier, and I'm the kind of person, as soon as I'm done with something and the final edits are over, I forget everything that I wrote. I don't remember what happens. The only reason I remember what happens in the first and second books is because I had to reread them to write the third one. But other than that, it's really, as soon as it's done, it's sort of done for me. Yeah.
Monique Williams asks, how were you able to implement the science fiction ability of the characters deflecting bullets with their hands while still maintaining a realistic storyline?
Ah, well, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't know what's realistic. I think about the characters are the characters themselves and their motivations, their reactions to trauma, to danger. I think the thing that's extraordinary about them is that they're the kind of characters, because I think it creates great drama, that runs towards danger instead of running away from it. But as far as the science fiction elements go, that's always really tricky. But I think basically, as long as you set up the laws of your universe early on, and then you stick to those rules, it will feel realistic to the reader. It will feel at least that, like, they don't have to go beyond that initial suspension of disbelief. You're still working within the framework of the rules that you've laid down.
Very good. Who was your favorite character to write?
God, who was my favorite character to write? I really love Emma. I think because I think that she's just really cool. She's someone that I wish I was as strong as. So she was really fun to write, because and this is, I think, true with most of the characters, they're all very conscious of who they are and what they want to be. They might have a lot of inner turmoil, a lot of unanswered personal questions, but as far as being activated individuals, people who are aware of where they fit in the world around them and what they want to do to change that world and change who they are within that world, they're all very conscious. Even the bad guys know what they want to do. So in that way, they were all really fun to write. Yeah, I think that's my answer. I don't know if that's a cop out.
No, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh God. Jacob Rivera asks, do you think you'll ever move into erotic novels once Emma comes of age? You don't have to answer that one. We'll move on. Pretty sure Emma's a full adult by season 2, isn't she?
She is definitely a full adult.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So BJ asks, what's one thing you could change from the story that you think about as you approach the ending?
One thing I would change, boy, I don't know. One thing I would change. I'm going to say nothing, but that's not because I think that they're perfect. It's just that or that I couldn't have done better. I just don't know. I don't know what it would be. It's one of those things that, I mean, and this as because you've edited it, and you've edited so many things, and it's that when you change one thing, it really means it's this domino effect down the line. So when I think about that question, I think of, like, well, there would have to be a big thing for it to be worth changing, and what would that big thing do to the rest of the story? And this was really my experience with going back and editing the book for Serial Box the first time, was that basically the whole second half of the novel is new. It's different from what it originally was. But the reason that is because we changed one thing about halfway through it, and then realized, well, now I have to rewrite everything from this point on. So so if I think about changing something in the first or second book, it's like, well, then the third book is completely different. So yeah.
Wow. On a related note, when you wrote the first one, obviously there was no immediate prospect of a follow-up, right? Mm-hmm. That came much later. So had you imagined already the direction you might take the story early on, or did you make did you figure it out as you went?
Yeah, a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
Okay. So you had some idea of where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I wrote 300,000 words of a second book right after it was published, of which I think maybe 3 pages made it into the actual published book that went up for Serial Box. So I had an idea, and in that book, that no one will ever see because it's awful. She goes to the north. She is looking for her brother. Those 2 things are basically themes that were pulled from, that I knew I wanted to do, that were pulled into the actual second season. But other than that, everything is different. And then I also knew that at some point I wanted her to be paired with the creature, because as an homage to Lone Wolf and Cub, and because the story is so generational. What you see this dying generation of the bullet catchers, of which there are so few remaining, and who in themselves never thought it possible or even desirable to pass on the information they possess to anyone else, sort of let it die. There's this quote that's, sometimes the bad things come up and replace the good things just because they're stronger. Sort of like a theme for 2020. And, and that is sort of the mindset in which we find this older generation at the beginning of book 1. And the thing that's amazing about Emma is that she represents youth, but not just youth flat. She's youth in all of its potential. She's all potential, and that's what Lobo says to her in the very first book. And because of that potential, he sees in her hope for the future. And since that was so important for their relationship, I really wanted to put her in a situation where she had that same possibility of carrying forward that hope to the generation that comes after her.
Yeah, it's beautiful symmetry. I agree. Cool. Dan Gerska wants to know, what else are you writing?
Hey, Danny. I am not writing anything at the moment. It's so funny because Dan Gerska, he's my best friend in the world. I've been working on a novel for the last 8-9 years. That's very personal, and it's fiction, but it's not layered in any sort of genre trappings or anything like that. And he's read an early version of that book that I'm sure was very torturous. So I think that's what I'm working on in perpetuity until I get it right. Fair
enough. Karen Herzog would like you to know you are incredibly talented, for sure.
Right. Thank you, Karen.
And Dan also comments, I love listening to you read. Also, you paint such vivid scenes that are so fun and easy to imagine. Hear, hear. Let's talk about the audio, because, Serial Box's model obviously is to bundle the e-text and the audio together. And when we do audio, we generally try to, completely sound design it. Sometimes we use, multiple narrators. Bullet Catcher only needed the one narrator because it's pretty much a single POV. But for you, what was the experience like of seeing, having your work produced that way in a completely different format and performed, in a sense by a narrator?
I'm sorry, I lost that entire question.
Geez, I'm sorry, man. I guess did I freeze?
No, I think I might have frozen.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I'll sum it up real quick. What was it like for you to have your work produced for audio?
Oh my God. I mean, that was a dream come true. the woman who reads it, Inez, she's so incredibly talented. And one of the coolest moments of my life actually was back when the first book was being turned into audio. I was given a list of audio samples from a bunch of different narrators, and it was so cool hearing everybody's take on the character until we found the right one. And it's so funny because, you know, when I was reading this, I was just thinking like, man, this is compared to the actual audiobook of this must be not great, you know, because it's so good. And it's so much better, I think, than, it's one of those things where like now when I was writing this third book, I had her voice in my head because of the audiobooks. And for me, it was, you know, it was a dream come true getting an audio version of the book. It was amazing.
Cool. If anybody else has any questions, please do post them. We've still got a bit of time. So what else shall I ask you, Joaquin? So I was really, as you know, shattered when you decided to, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read season 2, when you killed Lobo at the end of season 2. You and I discussed it, and you said, no, it's the right move. It has to happen. And I supported that. Don't you regret it at all?
I don't think I do. You know, it is one of those things where I did miss his character, and you know, the writing, book 3 was challenging to write because for the first time, Emma didn't have this foil to talk to.
Right.
And so it reminded me a little bit of Agatha Christie, because Agatha Christie, I'm a big detective fiction kind of person, and Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle, they went through the same transformation in their writing. Agatha Christie is a million times better than Arthur Conan Doyle. But they went through the same transformation, and that's that they had these brilliant detectives, Hercule Poirot and Sherlock Holmes, and they are so brilliant that I think the fear is that a reader would not be able to connect with the mind of this person. So both writers introduced characters to be the mediator between the reader and the detective. And what you find is at some point, both authors abandon that character, just so you get the one-to-one with the brilliant minds of these detectives, and really, you know, the minds of Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle. And it's somewhat the same with Lobo, is that now that he's not there, she can communicate directly with the reader. And the reader becomes that foil for the character.
Have you ever dreamcast your characters? I mean, you know, imagined specific actors playing them, or, you know, a lot of writers do that.
I don't know. I don't know if I have. I mean, I think, you know, I've imagined like Alfonso Cuarón directing it.
Okay.
You know, or, you know, any one of the three amigos really would be, you know, I've dreamed of that, just because I would imagine what a great artist would do to change it and to improve upon it and to make it their own.
Cool.
Yeah.
So BJ asks, did working with audio change how you structured the second and third seasons as a writer?
It did change it, kind of like I said. Well, okay, so it changed it in a few ways. The first one being that, and this is something that was honed over the course of the 3 books, like I said, was that Serial Box's best practices changed from one book to the next. So what's kind of interesting about the books is over the course of the 3 of them, I think you can sort of see that transformation. in the format. And writing to that format was interesting for me as someone who hadn't experienced such a thing before, and really looked at chapters as not necessarily something I was hugely fond of, let alone episodes of something, because within an episode you have to create a rising and falling action, and that felt a little scary for me, just because I think, especially as a younger writer, I wanted my characters to be extremely meditative, probably over meditative, to the point of the reader's probably falling asleep. So what was great about the serial box format is that all of a sudden I was tasked with making it so, here, think about this as an episode of a TV show. You're not going to just watch a TV show where someone is sitting on the couch thinking about things for 30 minutes. You have to have them go out and do something and be active participants in the story, which is just a good lesson, I think, for young writers, especially because I think young writers really want all their characters to be smart. And when someone is quote unquote smart, you think about them thinking a lot about things. But really that thinking has to transform into action. And really, if you have good descriptive action, they can be playing out their thoughts instead of, and then therefore be participants in their own thinking and methodology, instead of just being inactive and sitting and thinking about things and not doing anything. So that's what's great about the serial format, is that every chapter has a hook, every chapter has a rise, every chapter has a minor resolution that leads into the next episode, that really just drags you through, pulls you through the story. I mean, there's a reason why TV is surpassing filmmaking in telling great stories, and that's because the format plays well for storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Cool. You mentioned Agatha Christie and Conan Doyle. Who are your other influences in terms of authors?
Oh man! So actually, in the very beginning of book 3, I quote a book called "He Died with His Eyes Open," which was one of the best British detective stories ever. Just really kind of noir and gritty, and really, really thoughtful in what it means to be alive, what it means to die, what it means to know that you will die someday. And I think that that's really interesting, because if I were to boil down character motivation to one important thing, it would be that it's really interesting what happens to a character when they realize their own mortality. When they realize, because of either an instance or because of a lifetime of things happening to them, that they are not going to live forever, and what do they do with that information? And like I said, with all the characters in this book, what they do is they sort of run towards that danger because of that immediacy of death, because the world around them means that you're going to have probably a shorter lifespan. So make with it what you will. What are some? I mean, my favorite author of all time, and my books are nothing like hers, but she is the greatest living writer, and I won't hear anything about it. Is Marilyn Robinson, is the absolute, in my opinion, most phenomenal writer. When you talk about empathy, I think that she expresses what it means to be human, what it means to be empathetic, what it means to be so yeah.
All right, I think we missed the end of that. Do you want to? Yeah.
I was just going on and on and on, waxing poetic about Marilyn Robinson, and how wonderful she is. If anyone has never read Housekeeping or Lila or any of her wonderful books. The Death of Adam, which is a book of essays of hers. Um, she's fantastic.
Cool. Okay, Mitch wants to know, how does Serial Box promote content? Hey, BJ, you want to take that one?
One's out of my hands.
I was thinking about how to jump. Hold on, maybe I got my video off.
Everybody, BJ is one of our marketing guys.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So my job is essentially to do a lot like the manual reach out to different communities that might be interested in content like Bullet Catcher and get them involved and engaged with it and let them know it exists, which is always a struggle in any book publisher. So, but we have a whole team that works with me who are much smarter and more capable than I am, who do all sorts of things like things from Facebook advertising to large-scale growth marketing efforts to get the book out in front of as many people as we possibly can. So it's like any publisher. It's a little bit of everything that we can possibly do. But where I come in and what I could speak to is the more manual pavement pounding, or sort of the old-fashioned way of like handing out the book to each person I can possibly get in front of.
Thanks, BJ. It's also worth noting that Serial Box is basically a startup. And when I joined the company, I was the 13th employee, and we only had 2 people in the marketing department. That was a year and a half ago. And, over the last few months, we've added a whole ton of staff. We now have like 26 people on staff, and the marketing department is much bigger. And we're able to do a lot more these days than we were able to do a year ago. So we are a work in progress in so many ways, but it's a fun work in progress because, startup, I come from traditional publishing, which is, ancient and set in its ways and very institutional and, changes very slowly. Startup is the complete opposite. Adapts as it goes along and tries new things and, gives up on stuff that isn't working and, experiments a lot more. So it's really it was an interesting transition for me. That's neither here nor there. It just felt like part of the conversation we were starting to have. Razel, is that the way you pronounce that?
It's Rizal, I believe.
Rizal. I apologize for mangling your name, Rizal. Rizal wants to know which of these 3 books would you consider the best? Do you feel a sophomore slump when you were writing the 2nd or the 3rd? And he goes on to say, I would assume Emma's story closes at the end of book 3. Are you planning on returning to this world in the future?
Hi, Rizal. God, I actually think that the 2nd book is my favorite of the 3. The first one, I think what came out of the first one, I'm really happy with it. After the edits that Lydia and I worked on, I thought it got to a really great place, and I was by the end of it, it was one of those things where it's like, because like I said, there was 5 years in between when it was published in the UK and when Serial Box published it. I had time, endless time, to go back and reread it and think about all my mistakes. So it was, I remember when I got the news from my agent that I was going to have the chance to rewrite it and republish it. I did a cartwheel, because you don't get, it was in ink, you don't get the chance to go back and redo it. So that was so much fun and such a gift. And then the 2nd one, I felt like I was, like I said, just a much more mature writer. I was working with Marco, and I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do with it. Like I said, I had written hundreds of thousands of words for practice on what I wanted it to be. So I felt like the intent of it was really clear. I was really happy with the language and with the outcome of it, even killing Lobo. and the third one, the third one is new. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I got to wrap my head around it. As far as returning to the world, I mean, yeah, I would always return to the world. I think that it would entail a different cast of characters in a similar setting. I feel like, kind of like, the original trilogy of Star Wars, the Holy Trilogy, this story with these characters are done. But I could definitely imagine different stories within the world.
Cool. And I've been wondering myself, because we never actually discussed this. What first drew you to write a weird Western?
There was a couple things. I did not like Westerns before writing it. And the idea first came to me when I was in grad school, and we had an assignment where we had to write within a genre that we thought we disliked. And in order to do so, I read a bunch of Westerns, some Lone Dove, a lot of Cormac McCarthy. And if you haven't read Blood Meridian, it is Moby Dick in the American West. It is unbelievable. And I fell in love with the motifs. And what I realized was that it had a lot of similarities with detective fiction, which was always one of my favorite genres, in that you get the idea of, if you look at the persona of the cowboy, you see the same persona reflected in the detective. Here is someone with their own set of morality, and the morality is very strict, but the morality is usually opposed to the morality of the civilization, quote unquote, around them. And that's usually because the civilization around them is unlawful in some sort of way, or corrupt. So you have these characters working outside of the system in order to create justice. And in that same way, that's why you have crossovers like The Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai as well, because you get that same idea with Japanese samurai stories, which is where Lone Wolf and Cub came in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And, you decided, it didn't really take place in our world. It takes place in a kind of, made up world that could be ours, but, you don't use any familiar names or, historical events or anything like that. You decided to skew a little steampunk, as you said. Is there any reason you decided to do it that way rather than to, have it be this historical fiction? Did you consider historical fiction for
I
this?
did. And we're about to get a glimpse into like my grumpy old man brain. So I get frustrated when people, and I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's a wrong thing to do. It's a personal pet peeve. When people get really interested in parts of a story that seem unimportant to the telling of that story. For example, if we look at like the marketing of the most recent Star Wars movies, there was a lot of talk generated between the movies about the heritage of the characters. If they were genetically linked to characters that we already knew, or if they're their own characters. And those are questions that I think are not. They might be interesting to think about, but these aren't things that really impact the storytelling. And in fact, will distract, I think, careful viewers or careful readers from what might be important about the stories being told to them. And those, I think, are the larger themes there, not where someone is from or who they are, but the larger themes within the story. And when it comes to considering whether Bullet Catcher was somehow in our, I felt like this is something that's a distraction. It would be kind of fun to drop in little hints like, here's a dusty Coca-Cola bottle or something like that. And like, oh no, this is 50 years in the future. You maniacs, you blew it up. Um, but that's not what I wanted the book to be about. I wanted the book to be really focused on the themes of the characters and the characters themselves, how they grow up, how they react to the situation around them.
Cool. Well, we're going to have one more question. This one's from TS, and he asks, or she asks, what are some themes, characters you would like to explore if you were to do a spin-off or another sequel?
Oh, hello, TS. Thank you for the question. Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, kind of like I said, I feel like the stories of these characters is finished. But I think what would be interesting is to look at the creature when they are an adult. What has happened to Emma and her cast of characters? What has changed within this short amount of time? Because what we have in the setting is it's so nebulous, and the power vacuum is so great that there's a lot of change that can be affected in a very short amount of time, even one generation. So I think that would be really interesting to explore, that future generation. And at the same time, I feel like it would be really fun to explore what things looked like when the bullet catchers were more prominent, were revered, when they were common. I think that would be really interesting as well, to tell those kind of stories. There was one character in the first book who was an old gunslinger, who was quote unquote a bad guy, and I think it would be really interesting to explore her story as well, just because you see this very conscious character who's on sort of the wrong side of history in a way. And where we meet her as an old woman in the first book, she is someone who has changed as an old person. When I think as we get older, we either become more conservative or much more liberal. And this is someone who has become much more liberal and much more open-minded by the time we meet her. But how fascinating would it be to go back and see her as a youth and full of fire and anger? So yeah.
Cool. Well, we're at 7:03, and that really brings us up on time. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Joaquin, fantastic job. You're amazing, and we really can't wait for Bullet Catcher 3 to be available. I can't wait to listen to it. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great evening. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, BJ. Thank you, everyone who showed up.
Yes.
I just want to say, for anybody who's not looking in the chat, there is a code if you want to get the first season of Bullet Catcher for free on Cereal Box. Once you sign up, you can use the code IthacaBC and get that free season.
Cool. And thank you again, Sophia, for hosting us, and BJ for setting this up. Really appreciate it. And everyone for attending. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.